Good morning and welcome back to the studio. So today we're going to venture forth into the realm of light and shadow and how it describes form and creates the illusion of three-dimensional space on a two-dimensional surface. And this little demonstration is going to be broken down into three parts. First, a little talk about the functioning of light and shadow as it appears, say, in this little still life. The second part will be a discussion of materials, charcoal and other materials used to create light and shadow. And the third will be a bit of a demonstration on how to put it all together. Using Noire or blocking in technique. So first, let's talk about the properties of light. Light and shadow exist visually most often in terms of a hierarchy. There is a definite light and shadow areas. The light areas can be described, and we look at this still life here, as light to lighter or highlights. So I got my light coming down here, got my highlight areas, light tone areas, and so the light's coming down this way. So here is sort of a dividing line right here as the light shifts down. So I've got my light to lighter areas, and they move into a midtone as they travel over, and then they travel into the realm of shadow. And the shadow consists of a base tone that can be sort of broken down into a core shadow, and a core shadow is due to a reflected light and a cast shadow. And so let's see. The reflected light happens because light bounces around. It bounces, in this case, back off of the edge of the book, off of the surface of the paper, and it bounces down, and in this case, bounces back up into here, which creates a reflected light area. That reflected light leaves this area right in here as a core to the shadow. And the properties of the shadow also change and shift throughout the form and how the form is situated on the paper. In this case, you get light coming down, bouncing back up onto the under part of the plaster skull, and then back down onto the paper, creating a light within the shadow. It's really quite beautiful. Also, shadows tend to have a harder edge the closer they get toward the form. This is most often the case. And in this case here, that edge is harder and it gets blurrier as it shifts out away from the form. So there's a lot of really beautiful and interesting aspects to shadows that can be used to enhance your drawings. Let me demonstrate for you a little bit more about the reflective quality of light. Of course, in this case, this is a drawing using charcoal, so we're just dealing with black and white. But if I were to reset this still life up with, say, this blue of this book here, and a red book here, what happens is that, of course, as you can see, those lights that are reflected and bouncing around now have a tremendous amount of color in them. Coming back up and into these areas, this light creates a blue inside this little bit of a core shadow in here, and reflected light that now has color temperature. And this of course, has a red tint to it, and then you get some violets in there, which is really great for painting. So this is why painting. Also, I've got my little lamp here. I can change the temperature of the light on. So watch as I do that. Now, that this is a warmer temperature light, so that really changes the way that this form appears. That, as you can see, shift back through these and come back to my original color right here, sort of a neutral white. And that the camera's now picking this up and making it all bleached out. Let me put this back to its original. Take these off and get back to some just black and white. All right. So now we're back to the black and the white. That is the structure of, that's the beginning of the structure of the light. The next part that is really very important to notice and to deal with in your drawings is the edge quality. There are basically three kinds of edges. There are hard edges. In this case, the edge between the skull and the background, that's a hard edge. The edge between the cast shadow and the eye there, or this highlight along that nose and inside there, those are hard edges. The light here between the bottom paper surface and the edge of the skull here, that's a soft edge. And back in here too, that edge is soft. And if I blur my eyes a little bit as I'm looking at that, the form appears to disappear into the ground. Similarly here, in parts of this shadow area and that shadow area, those becomes almost lost edges. So I have a hard edge. I have some soft edges. Another kind of a soft edge is as the light turns from highlight to light tone into this mid-tone area that creates a core shadow. Those are all soft edges, and that is creates the illusion that that light is turning around that circular form. And so when I'm drawing this, I need for all of those edges to be soft. And then I get truly lost edges. And let me see in the camera here. Yes, there are edges between the form back here and between the form up in here. This area here becomes a lost edge. And if I blur my eyes at them, they're so close in value that I almost lose the distinction between the figure and the ground. And it's very important to understand those. A lot of artists will exaggerate those lost edges to create a sense of mystery and tension in their drawing. So those are the aspects of light and shadow, the formal aspects that you want to be able to begin to discern and to differentiate as you begin to draw in order to create a convincing three-dimensional illusion on your paper. Let's talk a little bit about materials now. So we're going to be using charcoal. Let me get this situated so you can see my little collection of stuff here. What I have, what we're going to use most for this technique is willow charcoal. And willow charcoal is burnt willow. Our charcoal made from willow. You can make your own charcoal if you want. Here's a little, every once in a while I'll do this. Got this old Russell Stover candy tin and fill it with, in my case, I've got a bunch of grapes and different kinds of wood around my property. So here you can see that a little bit better. It's old grapevine charcoal. I've made a bunch charcoal from a bunch of different kinds of woods, from some hardwoods and fruit woods. They all come out different hardnesses and give you different color temperatures. And what you do is you just take your tin, fill it up with the dry wood, wrap a piece of wire around it to secure it, and put it in the charcoals of a charcoal grill or a fire. Have a little campfire. And then leave it overnight, and it creates charcoal. It's pretty fun. That's what this is. So I'm going to use a little bit of that today. But the willow, it gives you a beautiful, deep, dark black. It's very soft. It erases well. So that's what we're going to use a lot for this technique I'll show you today. These charcoal pencils and this thing here, this is compressed charcoal. Compressed charcoal, and the charcoal in charcoal pencils is compressed. It takes the powder made from the vine and willow and other things and make dust out of it, and then reformulate it and glue it back together in these shapes. And what that does is creates a product that gives you some really gorgeous deep darks that are much more deep and velvety than what the vine or willow are going to give you. But the downside is that they have glues in them that don't erase off the paper as easily. So I'll use them, and the charcoal that's in charcoal pencils, I'll use them all. They're soft, medium, and hard in this case in these charcoal pencils, but I'll use them after I establish my form with the vine charcoal, so that I know where I put it. I'm not going to have it placed in an area that is going to need to be lighter. In order to make things lighter, I have two products that are going to help me establish my highlights and sometimes my light tones, and that is charcoal. This is white chalk from Chalkboard Chalk, handy stuff. And this is a white charcoal pencil. This is General's brand charcoal pencil, is one of my favorites. And this came in this King Art drawing kit that I've been using. And I have to say I'm a little bit disappointed with this product. It doesn't draw the lights as easily as I would like it to. Maybe I just need a more abrasive surface, but the General's brand tends to give it up a little bit easier. The other way of making lights, establishing lights, are of course with erasers. And erasers, got a kneadable eraser. This is extremely handy for charcoal pencil drawing, or charcoal drawing, because I can formulate tips and shapes. White plastic eraser tends to be harder, a little more abrasive, and I can be more aggressive with it. This is an art gum eraser, and it's not quite as hard as the white plastic erasers, but handy nonetheless. And I really like these. This is a mechanical eraser. It's if you can hear that, it spins this tip here, this eraser tip, that I can increase the length on. So with this tool, I can use the eraser to draw some pretty detailed lights in. And this is a different brand of one. It's got a little bit bigger tip on it. Anyway, so those are my tools. I also like this long handle here. By the way, you can get these, and these are great for drawing big drawings, which I won't be doing today, but I had it out to use as a pointer. One last thing you'll need is some sort of softening tool. This is called a chamois or chamois. This sheepskin is traditionally sheepskin. And you can see it's got a bunch of charcoal already in it. It's just a very soft piece of sheepskin in this case. And this works for blending. For blending also, blending stumps are great. I will use feathers as well. Here's a feather from one of my favorite chickens. And also very soft bristle brushes are great. And I'll show you how to use these. And I stole this one from my wife or daughter. I can't remember. It's a little makeup brush here for softening edges as well. So those are what we'll be using today for this drawing demo. And let me get things set up, and get back and get started with it. All right, so let's get started drawing. First, here is a little list. Hopefully this comes through in the video since I can't see it. This is a list of light and shadow structure. So light and shadow, we have highlights, light tones, midtones, base tones, core shadows and reflected lights. They're sort of twins, opposite twins. Cast shadows and all of their variety. 3 types of edges: hard, soft, and lost. What I'm going to show you here is called a Noire technique. And I'll try and get this up here as well. So the first, Noire means to work from the black. It's French. And there are all kinds of Noire techniques in painting, printmaking, and drawing. Essentially, you're working from a dark or black or toned paper. So the first step that we're going to do in this technique is to tone the paper. And I'm, to do that, going to use some of this charcoal that I made. And I'm not going to work off the white surface here. I want to tone this paper, and this is where chamois comes in handy. I'm going to use the chamois to gray this out. Okay. So I've got a simple gray surfaced paper, and that I will work off of. This is handy for those times when you're maybe less than thrilled to work off of a white surface paper. So what I've established here, basically in the structure of the light and the shadow, are my mid-tone value areas. And I need to bring out the realm of light, the light to lighter aspects, and then soften everything, and then establish the realm of shadow, and soften everything and go back. So I'm going to take my kneadable eraser here and formulate a nice edged, sort of like a paintbrush, and begin to look at the light value areas. Draw these in, and I want to do this in a way where I'm sort of mapping or chunking in or blocking in these light tones, and at the same time I'm looking at a little bit of reflected light here. This is this top of the skull here. I'm not doing this with lines, so if you are the kind of artist who really loves to deal with line, set that aside for a moment and use this to help you train your brain to just see form in terms of its light and shadow. This is a very, very efficient way of creating light and shadow. And so you can see the beginnings of this skull form here. And I can't draw this without drawing the ground space. And so that includes the paper that the skull is setting on. Make sure that you can see all this. And the background space. So the line right here for the back of the paper back there travels behind the skull, and I'm going to draw the white shape in, or paint. It's almost more like painting the white shape in to establish the beginnings of a shadow shape, and I made that too small. So this is sort of more of a soft edge, and this eraser isn't doing it, so I'm going to grab a harder one. I want to bring in some more assertive lights in here across the top of that form. All of these I want to keep mostly soft edge at this point. What I want to point out as well is that with my light source being over here off to this side, there is a gradient of light that happens both in the background on that dark gray curtain and on the surface of this paper. The light, there's more light here than there is back over here. So when I establish my ground that the surface that this skull form is sitting on, I need to begin to look at that gradient of light as it shifts away from the light source. If I don't establish that gradient, it's going to visually look like that surface is flat, right? It'll just help destroy the visual that I'm trying to establish. All right, so I've done the first two steps pretty well here. I've got them established. I've toned the paper and I've established the light to lighter areas. And now I'm going to take let's see, in this case, I'll just use this feather, and I'm going to soften everything back up just very gently. I could also do this with a brush, a little more control with that, or a chamois, or this tool as well. So it's softening and pushing it back in to the surface of the paper, and now I want to come back in with a little bit of vine charcoal, and I'm going to use the side of this. I want to avoid I have very deep tendency to revert back into line personally. I'm a line person, so I need to avoid my tendency to go with line and instead begin to block in the realm of shadow. And I'm going to sort of unify in my mind's eye all of these shapes of shadow, including the shape of the shadow that is being cast by the skull. Get all of this in here, chunk that in. I'll get all the nuances later. This is like using a focus on a camera lens. Slowly I'm going to bring this all into focus. Leave that little highlight there on the bottom of that. Recognize the reflected light over there. Here, reflected light is a servant in the realm of shadow. If you make your reflected light as your light tones or your midtones, it's going to screw up the hierarchy and destroy the illusion of light and shadow. So here I can, all of this area, draw over all my instructions, are a part of light and shadow realm, including the shadows in this eye form, a little bit in here, a little bit down here. And again, this is like painting with a wide brush to establish these areas instead of drawing with a sharp pencil. And now this is beginning to take shape. Now now that I've established the shadow areas, I'm going to take a soft tool and begin to soften all of that texture. I'm being very gentle here. I don't want to lose all of the work that I've just done. I'm just going to soften everything back up. Again, you can do this with a chamois. If you don't have a chamois, you can grab a softened paper towel or a shop towel or a soft piece of cloth, soft brush from your watercolor set. All right. Now I'm going to go back and soften. I'm going to go back and reestablish my lights. I'm going to continue to do this process until I bring this form out and I have my light to lighter, dark to darker realms established, and I begin to correct proportional errors as I go along, and be aware of how I'm beginning to build edges. So remember, there's three kinds of edges. There's hard, soft, and lost edges. And if you screw any of those edges up, you're going to distort and destroy the illusion of light and shadow. Something you might want to do for stylistic purposes, but for our purposes of really studying light and shadow, we want to be able to control how those edges function. And so soft, soft, soft edges throughout here. It gets a little harder down in this area here, so I can begin to formulate those. This is all soft, 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 hard here. Okay, really efficient way to work. So you can see this this form is beginning to pop out. If I were an expressionist, I would I'm liking this drawing, beginning to think that, oh, I could be close to being done, because it's got sort of a eerie, dreamlike feel to it. But I want to push this a little further and really study these forms. And so I'm going to exaggerate, like down here where these teeth sort of just almost, if I blur my eyes a little bit, I get a sense that they are blending in with that ground. And you can see how effective that can be used for expressive purposes. The softening, in this case, of this edge, and also of this edge here, back in, down in here. Things become more dreamlike and expressive if you exaggerate your soft edges. And get this light, up in here. Soft as it turns. Now, just very gently coax in a reflected light back here. It's light reflecting off that standing book. So there's a bit of reflected light coming back on this side of the ocular bone here. So here is an example of where my reflected light is too light, and it's competing with the light that is down here. It's actual highlight off the cheek, and these lights over in here. So they're too close, and what it looks like is that I have like you're at a campfire, right? And you've got a light shining up at your face, which gives you a backward light. So if I want this to be more and realistic. I need to set that light back into the realm of shadow. So I will do that here. Bring just a touch more value down. Now that's sort of settling back into place where it should be. All right. So now that I've done that, I'm going to gently, very gently, soften all of this back. Soften, soften, soften. Get a little light back into that shadow there. Voila. Get some light. Darken that up here. That's too distracting. That's better. Okay. Now I'm going to continue to do this until I get to the point where my proportions are there, my light and shadow realms are structured correctly. I've got a good idea of my edges, and when I get to that point, then I'll come in with my charcoal pencils, and I will establish my detail, keeping the mystery of this Noire technique. But this technique is so good at creating mysterious sense of edges, edge quality, and openness and mysteriousness, sort of creepiness too, if I'm careful. Okay, so I'm going to stop this video so that it doesn't get too long, and I'm going to take a break and catch some lunch, and then I'm going to come back and draw some more and work on finishing this drawing up and talk a little bit more about that, and then we'll be done. So I've worked this drawing for a little bit now, and I've gotten it to a place where the light and shadow structure and edges are all basically established. There still needs to be some work done to it, of course, but I've pushed this vine charcoal as far as I can take it without it just blurring all over the place. So one of the things that I'm going to do right now that I recommend doing is using a little bit of, whoa, it's hard to read here. This is Blair brand very, very low odor spray fixative. It's a workable fixative, meaning that it's going to fix the drawing onto the paper, and it'll still allow me to erase and add to it, of course, but it'll be workable. The drawing will be workable. I can still remove what I need to unless I spray it heavily. I'm not going to spray it heavily. I'm just going to just give it a once over like that and let it set for a few minutes and then continue to draw into it. And then when I am all finished, I'll spray fix it again. I'll put a little heavier spray fix on it at that point. What I'm going to do between now and then is bring in the charcoal pencils and the compressed charcoal and the white chalk. The charcoal has stained the paper to the point where in areas in my highest highlights, I can't bring them back to white. So I've got to reintroduce them with another medium. One of the things to take note of when you use a white charcoal or a white chalk, after you spray fix it, sometimes you'll see those whites disappear. So a lot of artists will, before they're completely done with the drawing, establish those very highest highlights and then leave it, which is what I'll probably end up doing. And I'll be back with you in a moment after I work this some more and finish it up. All right, just a second to finish this up. So went in and added some further highlights and light tones and shadows and stuff, sharpened up some edges, softened up some others. And I think this drawing has come to a point where I'm going to call it done. And let me see if I can't get a little bit better shot of this here to give you an idea of the things that I've... So when I added the highlights and light tones to it, I did that with hatching and cross contouring. I think you can see a little bit of that in there. Sorry about the poor light. But so when by using the techniques of hatching and cross hatching, instead of using a blending stump, let's see if that can get that to focus on there a little bit better. That might be about as good as it's going to get, which is not its true look. That's a little bit better. Yeah, you can see some of those hatching and cross hatching marks in there. And there we go. Touch better. Still quite blurry, not as good through this lens, but you can see the cross contour lines with that white charcoal in there. Helps give this drawing some form. And let me turn the lights on. Sorry to make you seasick. Try to get a better shot of this. What? There. No, that's where the camera is. Anyway, so there you go. It's all right. It's still a bit washed out. But that gives you an idea of what we're up to. And